Have you ever looked into the eyes of a woman and felt like you were standing at the edge of something powerful, beautiful, unpredictable, maybe even a little dangerous? One moment she's soft and inviting, the next distant and unreadable. And you wonder, is it you? Is it her? Or is it something neither of you can quite name? You see, most men are taught to chase strength, to be providers, protectors, fixers. But when it comes to women, strength alone won't unlock her, because women don't want a man who only knows how to fight battles. They want a man who understands what she hides even from herself. And here's the truth, every woman has soft spots, vulnerabilities, and blind sides that aren't just emotional. They are psychological, relational, deeply wired into her sense of being. She may never say them aloud, but if you learn how to notice them, you will see her, not just her body. Not just her smile, but the soul behind it. This isn't about manipulation. This is about presence, power, emotional fluency. When a man understands a woman's weaknesses, not to exploit, but to connect, he becomes unforgettable. In this conversation, we're not going to talk about tricks. We're going to explore what most men never see. And once you do, you won't just understand her better. You'll understand yourself more deeply, too. Shall we begin? Let's begin here with something you've probably felt but couldn't explain. You meet a woman. She's everything, the way she looks at you. There's something magnetic in her eyes. She laughs at your jokes, leans in when you speak. And for a moment it feels like you've been chosen, like she's allowing you into a part of her world no one else has seen. You feel powerful, desired, needed, but then something shifts. She pulls away, not with her body necessarily, but with her energy. She becomes cooler, not cold but no longer warm, and you're left wondering, did you do something wrong? Was it something you said, or is she just like this? Most men don't realize this moment is where the real dance begins. Because what you've touched isn't just her attraction, you've touched something deeper, her first emotional crack. One of the many hidden weaknesses she carries and doesn't fully understand herself. You see, a woman's weaknesses are rarely visible on the surface. They don't announce themselves like a limp or a scar. They show up subtly, through shifts in tone, sudden silence, outbursts over small things, or the way she suddenly questions everything she previously loved about you. And if you're not attuned, you'll mistake it for drama, mood swings, or a lack of interest, when in fact it's something far more delicate. So let's start peeling this back. One of the first female weaknesses that most men overlook is her deep need for emotional certainty in an emotionally uncertain world. She wants to be the woman who's secure, independent, and strong. She reads the books. She's learned to hustle. She's been told not to depend on anyone. But inside, there's often a craving she's ashamed to admit to be deeply seen, not just loved, but emotionally known. And when that certainty doesn't come, she doesn't always ask for it. Instead, she tests, withdraws, distracts herself. She might even become hyper, independent as a defense, and here's where men miss the signal. Because if you chase her harder, buy more things, offer more solutions, she doesn't feel safer, she feels smothered. Because it's not what she wants. She doesn't want more things, she wants more you, your clarity, your stillness, your emotional leadership. She wants to know that you see the storm before she names it, that you can hold her energy without collapsing into it or running from it, that you can hold her tears without trying to fix them. That's what emotional certainty looks like to her. And here's the twist. If she doesn't get that from you, she'll start convincing herself she never needed it to begin with. She'll harden, she'll become performative, she'll start to live from the outside in, and that woman, she's everywhere today. Now, the second weakness, and perhaps the most confusing one to most men, is her conflict between independence and surrender. A woman wants to feel your leadership, but she also wants to feel her freedom. She wants to trust you, follow you, let you lead, but only when she knows that you've made space for her voice. This is a delicate paradox. If you try to dominate her, control her, suppress her, she'll rebel, not always loudly, sometimes just through disconnection. But if you become passive, overly accommodating, a man who fears her emotional weather, she'll lose respect. And when a woman loses respect, she loses attraction. So where's the balance? It's in presence, in steadiness. In making decisions not out of ego, but out of grounded leadership. When you invite her to walk beside you, not behind you, not ahead of you, but beside you, with the clarity of a man who knows his path, she breathes deeper. She may never say it, but she feels it, and she'll let go of control in ways that even surprise herself. Let me tell you something that might surprise you. Most women who are overly controlling in relationships, they're not doing it because they love control. They're doing it because they've never had a man they truly trusted. A man whose consistency, whose word, whose tone, whose integrity was so solid that she could finally exhale. So when a woman micromanages you, nags you, questions every little move, it's not always because she's difficult. Sometimes it's because the masculine energy in her life has been unreliable, so she becomes the man she needed. And now she doesn't know how to stop. But when she meets a man who doesn't flinch at her tests, who stays calm when she becomes chaotic, who doesn't try to silence her, but doesn't get pulled into her emotional tide either, she begins to surrender, not because she's weak, but because she finally feels safe enough to let go of the burden. And you, my dear listener, need to understand this. A woman's surrender is one of the most sacred gifts you'll ever receive. But it's earned not with manipulation, not with charm, but with consistency, with presence, with depth. Let's pause for a moment, because everything I've said so far, if you've lived it, you already feel the truth of it. And if you haven't, I'm inviting you into a different kind of listening, not just with your mind, but with your body, with your nervous system, because women feel that more than your words, she listens to your energy. She listens to the spaces between what you say. This is where attraction lives. This is where trust grows. This is where the walls begin to lower. So if you've ever wondered why a woman who once clung to you now seems distant, why the more you gave her, the less she seemed to want, or why she's drawn to emotionally unavailable men and then cries about not being loved, these first two truths may already begin to explain the pattern, because most women aren't confused. They're exhausted. They've had to protect themselves so long that softness feels foreign, vulnerability feels unsafe, and lover feels like a trick. But when a man sees past the performance, when he understands the inner conflict not to fix her, but to hold her, everything changes. Now let's keep going. So what happens when you meet a woman who has it all together, on the outside? She's composed, successful, socially charming, the kind who seems to glide through rooms, drawing attention effortlessly. You might think she doesn't need anything from me, she's solid, and yet somewhere deep in the rhythm of your connection, you begin to sense something else. A kind of tension beneath the surface, a subtle fear of letting go, a hesitation in intimacy. Maybe she disappears emotionally after a beautiful night. Maybe she avoids conversations that feel too deep, too fast, or maybe she laughs off her own pain before you even have a chance to hold it. This brings us to the next weakness, emotional self-protection masked as strength. You see, many women today carry a silent narrative. If I show you how much I feel, you'll think I'm weak, and if I depend on you too much, you'll leave. So instead, she becomes self-sufficient. Not because she wants to push love away, but because she's afraid it won't stay if she doesn't keep it under control. She'll give you her body before she gives you her fears. She'll tell you about her childhood dreams before she lets you see her current insecurities. She'll ask about your goals, your visions. your shadows, while carefully keeping her own at a safe distance. But here's the secret. She wants you to see past that, not in a forceful way, not by prying her open, but by offering a space so safe, so consistently grounded that she doesn't have to perform, where her tears won't be labeled too much, where her fears won't be fixed, but simply held. You may think women want perfection. They don't. They want emotional fluency. They want to be mirrored, felt, understood, not just intellectually, but emotionally. That's why she'll sometimes test you with contradiction. She says she's fine when she's not. She pushes you away just to see if you'll come closer, and yes, it's confusing. But it's also very human, because inside every woman who's learned to armor herself is a young girl who once reached for someone and felt them pull away. And now that memory lives inside her body, that's what you're really responding to, not just her behavior, but her past. And if you react defensively, impatiently, or with irritation, she closes the door before you even realize it was open. Now let's move to something that may feel counterintuitive, and yet it's everywhere, a woman's need to feel desire even when she pushes you away. This is one of the trickiest dynamics for men to navigate. You're with her, you care for her, you respect her. You don't want to cross any lines, so you hold back, you give her space. You try to be gentle, thoughtful, even passive, thinking this will show her how much you care. But in doing so, something gets lost, the fire, the edge, the erotic tension, and she feels it, even if she can't name it. She begins to miss your hunger, your boldness, your desire, not in a crude way, but in a masculine way, in a way that reminds her she's a woman. Now, here's the paradox. Many women will unconsciously push away what they most crave. Why? Because being deeply desired often brings up shame, fear, vulnerability, especially in a world that's told her, don't be too sexy, don't lead men on, don't take up too much space. So she plays small or cold or neutral, but what she wants is to be wanted, to be seen not just as smart or nice or loyal, but as wildly attractive in your eyes. And not just through words, through energy, through how you look at her, how you hold her hand, how your presence says, you are mine and I am here, but again, it's subtle. You must know the difference between pressure and presence, between demand and desire. When a woman feels like you want her without needing to own her, she opens. Her feminine energy blooms in response to your grounded hunger. But when she feels like you've gone numb, like you're just there, passive, comfortable, unexpressed, she feels unseen. Not unsafe, just untouched, and eventually unwanted. Desire is a weakness for many women, not because it's wrong, but because it's become unsafe in their history. Maybe she's been shamed for it. Maybe she's been used for it. Maybe she's only ever been desired, but never loved. And so now, she's caught between two worlds, craving your fire but fearing its consequences. This is where you come in, not as a savior, not as a seducer, but as a man who can hold both the flame and the tenderness, a man who can say with his eyes, I see you, and say with his body, I want you, without needing to prove anything. Let me ask you something. How many times have you held back your desire because you didn't want to offend her, or appear too forward, or risk rejection? And how many times has that very hesitation created distance instead of safety? It's not about being aggressive. It's about being attuned. Because when you learn to read the moment, not just her words, but her body, her breath, the energy between you, then desire becomes a dance. Not a chase, not a battle, a dance, and that dance, that is where the masculine and feminine meet at their most alive. Now let's speak about silence, not yours, hers. There will be moments when a woman shuts down, withdraws, goes quiet. You feel the change instantly. The texts get shorter, her voice loses tone, her body no longer leans in. And you panic, you try harder, you ask more questions, you try to talk it out. But here's another weakness most men never notice. A woman's silence is often not distance, it's data. She's collecting, feeling, testing, not you necessarily, but herself. She's wondering, do I feel safe here? Do I trust this? Can I fully soften, or do I need to protect again? You see, for many women, silence is not disinterest, it's sensitivity. It's the pause before the deeper reveal. But if you meet her silence with anxious need or frustration, she no longer feels seen, she feels interpreted. And that's dangerous. Instead, your power is in restraint, not withdrawal, but containment. Being able to sit with her quietness without rushing in to fix it. To say, I'm here when you're ready, take your time, that's a kind of strength most men never master. And yet it's the very strength that invites her to speak, because every woman carries a few locked rooms in her heart. The kind you can't force your way into, the kind you're only ever invited into through presence, patience, and the kind of masculine warmth that expects nothing but welcomes everything. And when she does open that door, when she finally lets you into the places she keeps hidden, even from herself, you will feel it. It's not just emotional intimacy, it's spiritual, erotic, deeply human, because in that moment you're no longer the man chasing her body. You're the man holding her soul. There's a moment in every meaningful relationship when a woman starts to mirror you, not your words, but your energy. She may not even be aware of it. The way she touches her neck when you're nervous, the silence she holds when you avoid your own truth, the way she suddenly stops laughing when your inner confidence begins to erode. It's not manipulation. It's resonance, because the next weakness is one many men feel the effects of but rarely name. Her emotional attunement becomes her emotional burden when a man is emotionally unavailable. A woman will often carry the emotional weight of a relationship if the man won't, not because she wants to, but because she feels she has to. She becomes the thermometer of the connection, checking your mood, your tone, the way you say I'm fine when you're not. And over time, without even realizing it, she starts to lead emotionally and begins to resent you for it. This is where many men feel confused. She used to be so loving, so present, so nurturing. Now she's cold, critical, impatient. But what you're seeing isn't just her frustration, it's her fatigue. She's been trying to connect with you on a level you may not even be aware of, trying to get you to show up with your heart, not just your actions. And when that doesn't happen, she feels alone in a room that's supposed to be for two. Let me tell you this. A woman doesn't need you to be perfect. But she does need you to be emotionally real. If you can't tell her how you feel, if you can't say I'm scared, or I don't know, or I feel like I'm failing, she doesn't feel safe being soft around you. She hardens, she becomes sharp. Not because she wants to dominate you, but because she no longer trusts you can hold what she needs to release. And here's the paradox. Many men think emotional vulnerability makes them weak in her eyes. But it's actually the opposite. When a man shows his emotional truth not in a desperate way, not in a collapsing way, but in a grounded, present way, a woman breathes. Because now she knows she's not the only one carrying it all. Another weakness that often surprises men is her longing for consistency in a world that constantly shifts her sense of worth. We live in a culture that tells women to be everything, soft and strong, sexy but not too sexy, independent but still willing to submit, available but not needy. The bar keeps moving, and so her identity keeps shifting too based on how she's seen, validated, or rejected. That's why your consistency is more powerful than you realize. It's not about always saying the perfect thing. It's about being the man who shows up in the same energetic frequency, whose words match his actions, whose eyes don't wander when another woman walks by, whose tone stays calm when she's emotional, whose decisions reflect integrity even when no one is watching. because consistency is where trust is born, and trust is her most sacred emotional currency. If she has to keep guessing who you'll be today, if she has to wonder whether your affection depends on her mood, her weight, her performance in bed, or her silence, she slowly pulls back in herself, not because she stopped loving you, but because her nervous system no longer feels safe. You may not see it at first. It begins with subtle withdrawal. She laughs less, touches less, doesn't bring up certain topics. You think everything's fine, maybe just a phase. But it's not. It's her soul protecting itself, and once that shutdown happens, reopening takes time and presence. So if you want to keep a woman connected to you, not just physically, but emotionally, you must become a sanctuary. Not a savior, not a fixer, a sanctuary, the place where her nervous system relaxes because your presence doesn't change with the weather. And now we arrive at one of the deepest weaknesses of all, one few men truly understand, a woman's tendency to self-abandon when she loves deeply. When a woman falls in love, something primal awakens, a kind of sacred devotion. She wants to give, to nurture, to pour into you, and if she's not emotionally mature, she may begin to lose herself in the process. She stops doing the things that light her up. She makes you the center of her schedule. She begins to define herself through your attention, your moods, your responses, and here's where you play a vital role, because if you notice this happening and do nothing, she will eventually implode. Not because you hurt her intentionally, but because you allowed her to shrink without resistance. A powerful man doesn't let a woman disappear into him. He reflects her back to herself. He reminds her of who she was before him. He encourages her fire, her friendships, her freedom. He doesn't see her devotion as an entitlement. He sees it as a gift, and he protects it by protecting her from herself. Because when a woman loses herself in a man, she eventually loses her desire for him too. Not because he failed her, but because she failed to stay rooted in her own wholeness, and he didn't call her back to it. That's why the best relationships are not about completing each other. They're about returning each other to center again and again. This is what makes a man magnetic to a woman, not just his ambition, or his confidence, or his sexuality, but his ability to see her fully and not get lost in her, to stay rooted in himself even when she's emotional, to stay present even when she tries to push him away, to hold his own integrity even when she forgets hers. Because the truth is, a woman will test your grounding, not always consciously, but it's how she learns to trust you. When you don't flinch, when you don't chase, when you don't collapse, she sees something rare. She sees a man. Not just a male, a man who can be the riverbank to her wild water, a man who can be still in her storms, a man who doesn't need her to be perfect or soft or agreeable to stay connected. And that, dear listener, is what makes you unforgettable. Not just to her body, but to her soul, there is a hidden ache inside many women, a longing they don't always speak out loud. It isn't just for affection or attention or praise. It's for recognition, a kind of emotional reflection that says, I see the way you carry everyone. I see how you soften when no one's looking. I see your effort, your stretch, your fight to stay loving in a world that often forgets your heart. This brings us to another silent weakness, her tendency to feel invisible in the very relationships she invests the most in. She gives, not because she's keeping score, but because it's who she is. She holds space for your ideas, your frustrations, your dreams. She remembers the way your shoulders slump when you're overwhelmed. She studies your voice to know when you're off, even when you don't say it. But after a while, when her giving becomes normalized and her presence becomes expected, something shifts. She begins to feel like a fixture, reliable, consistent but unseen. You may still love her, but do you see her? That's the difference. A woman doesn't want to be maintained. She wants to be cherished, not every day with grand gestures, But in the way you notice the little things, the new way she parts her hair, the way her tone lifts when she talks about something she secretly hopes you'll support, the way she's been holding back tears during dinner, but doesn't want to ruin the mood, you don't need to have all the answers. You just need to notice, to let her feel the reflection of herself in your eyes, because a woman who feels invisible becomes emotionally starved. She starts to resent your presence not because you're doing something wrong, but because your absence is now living inside the relationship. And when that happens, she either becomes numb or someone else starts noticing her instead. That's how emotional affairs begin, not always with desire, but with attention. And the man who offers it may not even compare to you in success, in strength, in history. But if he sees her when you don't, her heart starts to drift, not because she's weak, but because she's human. Now let's speak of something even more difficult. Something raw, a woman's fear that if she's truly herself, she'll lose you. This is one of the oldest, most primal fears in feminine psychology. She wants to tell you when she feels insecure about her body. She wants to admit that sometimes she compares herself to other women, that she gets scared you'll stop wanting her, that she feels silly for still being impacted by what her mother said, or by how her ex treated her, or by how life hasn't turned out the way she imagined. But she often doesn't say any of it, not because she doesn't trust you, but because she's still learning how to trust herself. She fears that if she shows you the full truth, her messiness, her contradictions, her emotional hunger, you'll pull back. You'll start to see her as needy or dramatic or too complicated, so she hides parts of herself. She smiles when she wants to cry. She supports you while her own heart is breaking. She says, "I'm fine," when everything inside her is screaming, "Notice me." And here's the truth. The more she hides, the lonelier she feels, and the lonelier she feels, the more disconnected she becomes even when you're lying right next to her. You can change this. You don't need to fix her. You don't need to have the right words. You just need to be safe enough for her to fall apart in front of you without losing your gaze. That's it, that kind of space. It heals generational wounds. It rebuilds nervous systems. It opens women in ways that even they didn't know were possible. But you can't offer that kind of space if you're afraid of emotion, if you flinch when she cries, if you shut down when she's angry. If you make her feel like her feelings are a burden to manage, you must become a man who doesn't just hold her body, but her chaos. A man who sees that her complexity is not a flaw, it's her fire. Let's go deeper still. Another weakness that women rarely admit, even to themselves, is this: the fear of outgrowing you. She wants love. She wants intimacy, but she also wants growth, expansion, newness, emotional aliveness. And when a relationship becomes predictable, static, flat, she begins to feel like her soul is shrinking. Even if you're a good man, even if you haven't done anything wrong, because a woman doesn't just want safety. She wants aliveness within safety. That's why you see some women stay in relationships for years, quietly dying inside, smiling for photos, posting vacation pictures, saying we're fine when friends ask, but at night she lies awake and wonders, is this all? She starts to seek novelty elsewhere, not always in people, but in ideas, in causes, in books, in fantasies. Anything that reminds her she's still alive. And here's where most men misunderstand. They think the answer is more comfort, more provision, more routine, but what she craves is your growth, your evolution, your emotional risk. She wants to see you stretch, not just in your career, but in your depth, in your listening, in your self-awareness, in how you love, because the man she fell for may have had fire, but the man she stays with must have fuel. When she sees you pursuing your growth not for her, but for you, she stays connected, she admires you, respects you, and that admiration becomes erotic, emotional, sacred. But when you plateau, when you become passive, When you give up on your own becoming, she starts to grieve, quietly, slowly, until one day she doesn't look at you the same. You want to keep her heart, grow with her. Not just in the beginning when it's exciting, but in the middle when it's hard, in the later years when the passion isn't automatic. Keep surprising her, not with gifts, with depth, with realness, with the version of you she hasn't met yet. Because just like you want to discover new parts of her, she wants to discover new parts of you. That's what keeps her feminine energy flowing. That's what makes her say, I choose this man still, again, always. There is a kind of silence between two people that feels more intimate than words ever could. It's the kind of silence that comes after a long embrace or a tear that isn't explained, and in that space, if you listen closely, you can feel the emotional fingerprints of your connection. For women, that space is not empty. It's where everything lives, their memory, their fear, their dreams, their grief, their longing, and often it's the place they go when they don't feel like explaining themselves anymore. Not because they don't want to share, but because they don't know if it will be received. That's why we need to talk about one of the most painful and misunderstood female weaknesses, the guilt of needing too much. Yes, guilt, because as much as women desire closeness, many carry an internal shame around their needs. Especially emotional ones. The world teaches her to be low maintenance, to be chill, to not ask for too much, to be the kind of woman who's cool with everything, who doesn't get clingy, needy, or emotional. So she learns to starve herself emotionally to remain desirable. And yet the hunger doesn't go away. She still wants your time, your full attention, your desire when she hasn't put on makeup, your protection when she doesn't have the words to ask for it. She wants to be held longer than usual, to be told that she's not too much, to be reminded that it's okay to need someone without feeling like a burden. But she won't always say that, because the very act of asking risks rejection, and rejection for a woman who has learned to internalize guilt as part of her femininity is a deep shame trigger. So what does she do instead? She hides her longing behind sarcasm. She pushes you away first. She tells you she's fine. She distracts herself, and sometimes she even sabotages the very love she craves, just to feel in control of her own abandonment. This is the root of so much confusion in relationships, because men hear the words but miss the wound. You say, just tell me what you need. She hears, don't make me figure you out. I don't want to do the emotional work. You say, I'm here, you know that. She hears, I'm physically present but emotionally checked out. And so the disconnection grows. But here's the thing. You don't need to solve her guilt. You just need to create a space where she no longer needs to carry it alone. Sometimes that looks like saying, you don't have to apologize for feeling that way. Other times it's simply not flinching when she breaks down, or holding her tighter when she tries to pull away. Because if you can love her when she's not easy to love, when she's messy, insecure, contradictory, that love becomes medicine. Not just for her, for every version of her who never got to feel fully wanted, just as she is. Now let's sit with something even more complicated. The quiet rage of not being understood. This isn't the rage you see in arguments or dramatic scenes. This is older, deeper, the kind that lives in her bones, the kind that says, I've been trying to be understood my whole life, and I still feel like I'm speaking a language no one hears. And this rage, it doesn't always come out as fire. Sometimes it shows up as coldness, as walls, as sarcasm, as sexual withdrawal, as a sudden change in how she looks at you. You think, what happened? She just changed overnight, but she didn't. She reached her threshold of being misunderstood, of feeling like her emotions are too much, of not being listened to all the way through before you respond. Here's the truth. A woman who doesn't feel understood becomes dangerous not in a malicious way, but in a disconnected way. She starts to live beside you, not with you. She'll still smile, still cook dinner, still play her part. But her heart is now behind a locked door, and once it's locked, it's hard to open again, because every time she tried to explain herself and you interrupted, she remembered. Every time she cried and you told her to calm down, she remembered. Every time she expressed a fear and you responded with logic instead of love, she remembered. It's not that she expects you to be a therapist. She doesn't need you to be emotionally perfect. She just needs to feel like you're trying to understand, not to fix, not to analyze, but to truly feel what it's like to be her. When that happens, when she feels understood, not just heard, she melts, and all the anger, all the edge, it softens, because she's no longer fighting to be real. She's allowed to be real. But if you continue to meet her emotions with defense, you become a mirror to every man who couldn't see her. And that is when she quietly starts grieving the version of you she thought you could be. So if you've been wondering why she seems colder, less engaged, less intimate, ask yourself, when was the last time I truly tried to understand her world instead of only showing her mine? Because understanding is not about having the right words. It's about slowing down, making eye contact. Sitting with discomfort, holding the conversation when it gets messy, and realizing that her emotional language isn't meant to confuse you, it's meant to include you. Let her know she's not crazy. Let her know she doesn't have to prove her pain. Let her know you're listening not to respond, but to receive. And then watch her rise, because when a woman feels safe in your presence, when she feels she can be her full, flawed, beautiful self without losing your affection, she begins to trust. And when she trusts, she opens fully, and when she opens, not just her body, but her heart, that is when you will experience a woman in her most magnetic, powerful, emotionally naked form. Not just in the bedroom, but in the way she looks at you, the way she supports you, the way she gives you her softness when the world is asking you to be hard. That's what most men never realize. A woman's weakness is not her undoing. It's the invitation to a level of connection most people never get to feel because they don't have the courage to go there. But you're already on the path. Let me ask you something quietly before we close. Have you ever looked at a woman, really looked at her, and wondered what she's had to survive to love the way she does? Not just what she says, but how she waits when you're busy, how she smiles when she's hurting, how she shrinks to keep the peace or stretches to make you comfortable. How she learns to read your silence before you've spoken a word. That right there is not instinct, that's experience. That's pain. That's a lifetime of learning how to stay connected to people who were not always safe. So if you ever feel like you're being asked to be more emotionally aware, more steady, more sensitive to things that don't feel logical, know that it's not about being perfect. It's about becoming trustworthy, because one of a woman's greatest weaknesses, perhaps the deepest of all, is this: she will betray herself just to keep love from leaving. And she'll do it so quietly, so convincingly, that you might not even notice. She'll say yes when she means no. She'll laugh when she wants to cry. She'll pretend something didn't bother her because she doesn't want to seem crazy. She'll give when she's empty. Love when she's numb, nurture when she's starving. She'll stay when she's dying inside, and for a while you'll believe everything's fine. Because she makes it look that way, until one day she's just gone, not physically, emotionally, spiritually, sometimes even sexually, and you'll wonder what happened. You'll think she changed, but she didn't. She just got tired of leaving herself to keep you close. This is why emotional intimacy is not optional, it's foundational. If you don't know how to recognize her small goodbyes, the little ways she starts to disappear, then you'll never notice you're losing her until it's too late. So what does it look like to truly love a woman who carries these kinds of wounds? It's not about being her therapist. It's about being her mirror, a place where she doesn't have to hide. A man who can say, I see the parts of you you've had to tuck away for years, and I still love you. A man who chooses her, not just when she's easy to love, but when she's messy, loud, distant, sad, unsure. A woman who feels emotionally safe will blossom in ways you never imagined. She'll become more radiant, more sexual, more playful, more honest, and not because she's being tamed, but because she's finally allowed to be her whole self. That is what makes a man unforgettable, not how tall he is, not how much money he makes, not how good he is in bed, but how he makes a woman feel about herself when she's with him. Does she feel safer? Does she feel freer? Does she feel more beautiful in your presence, not because of compliments, but because of how deeply you listen? These are the questions that matter, and now we arrive at the final truth, the last and perhaps most liberating idea of all. A woman's greatest weakness is also her greatest power. Her sensitivity is what allows her to notice the things you miss. Her emotional intensity is what draws you into your own soul. Her desire to connect is not neediness, it's wisdom. She wants to love you deeply, not to control you, but to call you home to yourself. She doesn't want to fix you, she wants to feel you. And if you allow that, if you learn to sit in the fire with her, to let her see your emotional skin, to stop performing and start being, you will unlock the kind of connection that men spend their whole lives chasing in all the wrong places, because in that kind of love you don't lose yourself, you meet yourself. Through her, with her, because of her, and in return she becomes more than your partner, she becomes your mirror, your muse, your sacred reminder that there's more to life than success, or control, or appearances. There's depth, there's softness, there's rawness, there's the beauty of loving someone not just for who they are, but for who you become together. So if you've been watching this and feeling something stir inside of you, some memory, some ache, some regret, some hope, then don't let it pass. Call her, look her in the eyes, say what you've never said, ask what you've never asked, apologize where you need to. Listen more deeply, touch more slowly, see her, really see her, because when you do you'll find a woman who's been waiting for you to come home, not just to her, but to yourself, and that, dear man, is what changes everything, not just in love, but in life.